Welcome to my channel, USA Battle Zone. Today, you're about to hear a story the world almost forgot, a story of courage, pain, and defiance. A story about a woman who stood up to power, right in the heart of a battlefield. When a colonel tried to humiliate her, and she snapped his arm in front of 282 soldiers. This isn't a war story about bullets. It's a war story about dignity. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll feel something deep inside your chest. Cut to slow motion shots of soldiers training, dust rising in the air, helicopters thundering above, and a woman's boots crunching gravel. Voiceover. Her name was Sergeant Leah Morgan. She wasn't supposed to be there. At least, that's what everyone kept saying. The battlefield isn't for women, they whispered. But Leah didn't listen. She didn't grow up to follow rules. She grew up to make her own. Born in a small town in Kentucky, raised by her father, a Vietnam veteran who believed in toughness, honesty, and pride. Every morning, he made her run 5 miles before school. Every night, she learned how to clean a rifle before bed. When other kids were learning fairy tales, Leah was learning survival. So when she turned 18, she didn't go to college. She walked into a recruiting office, signed her name, and said, "I'm not here to be the best woman. I'm here to be the best soldier." Montage. Training camp scenes. Rain falling on steel helmets. Mud up to the knees. Men shouting, laughing, falling, rising again. And Leah, in the middle of it all, silent, focused, unbreakable. She wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but she was the one who never quit. And that's what got her noticed. Within 2 years, she was promoted to sergeant. Within 3, she was deployed overseas, to a base in the middle of nowhere. That's where everything happened. Voiceover, soft, reflective. The base was dusty, dry, and tense. Everyone was tired. Everyone was angry. War has a way of stripping people down to their worst selves. And that's where she met Colonel Davis, a man respected by many, feared by all. He'd been in the army for 22 years. A legend. But legends, sometimes, forget what it means to be human. One evening, Leah was leading her unit back from a night patrol. Exhausted, hungry, covered in sand and sweat. They had lost 2 men that week, ambushed by insurgents. The team was shaken. She gathered them around, spoke softly, trying to keep their spirits up. That's when the colonel walked in. Dialogue scene, intense. Colonel Davis, gruff, "Sergeant Morgan. You call that discipline? Laughing after a mission. Where's your respect?" Leah calmly, "Sir, my team needed a moment to breathe." Davis interrupting, "You don't talk back to me. You think because you're a woman, I'll go easy on you." The room went silent. Every soldier froze. Leah clenched her jaw. "Leah. No, sir. I don't think that." The colonel stepped closer. He was towering, furious, but not because of her words. Because of what she represented. Defiance, independence, things that didn't fit his world. "Davis. You think you can lead men. You think you belong here." "Leah. With respect, sir, I've earned my place." And that's when he snapped. In one motion, he shoved her shoulder. Hard. The air cracked with silence. Every soldier stood frozen. And then, she grabbed his wrist. Voiceover, slow, cinematic. No one saw it coming. Not even him. Her training took over. Muscle memory, reflex, instinct. She twisted, pivoted, and with a movement so fast it was almost invisible. Crack. The sound echoed across the hangar. The colonel screamed, falling to his knees, clutching his arm, broken clean at the joint. 282 soldiers stood in shock. Silence swallowed the air, and Leah stood there, breathing heavily, eyes cold and steady. She didn't mean to humiliate him. She meant to stop him. But in that moment, the world turned upside down. Music turned somber, low strings playing. She was arrested within the hour. Her rank stripped, confined to her quarters pending disciplinary review. The story spread through the base like wildfire. Some called her reckless, some called her brave, but most just stayed quiet. That night, she sat on her bunk, staring at the wall. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from everything she had carried for years. Every insult, every doubt, every look that said you don't belong here. And she whispered to herself, If I don't stand up now, what was all this for? Dash dash dash. Voiceover. 2 days later, she was summoned to the tribunal. 3 officers sat behind a long table. The colonel's arm was in a sling. His eyes burned with fury. They asked her, "Sergeant Morgan, did you assault a superior officer?" And she replied, "No, sir, I defended myself." They pressed her, tried to make her say she regretted it. But she didn't. "Leah, if I had to do it again, I would still stop him." A soldier has the right to defend their dignity, even if the enemy wears the same uniform. The room fell silent. Voiceover, soft, emotional. The panel deliberated for hours. And finally, they reached their verdict. She wouldn't be dishonorably discharged. But she would be transferred. Out of combat, into logistics, far from the field. For the army, it was a compromise. For Leah, it was exile. Transition. Montage of her packing her gear, watching her unit from a distance, a helicopter taking off. Voiceover. She left quietly. No farewell speech. No salute. But as she walked across the base, something happened. One by one, soldiers started to stand. At first a few, then dozens, then hundreds. They didn't say a word. They just stood at attention, a silent salute to the woman who'd stood up when no one else dared. Leah didn't cry, but her throat tightened as she climbed into the truck. And as the engine started, she looked out the window and saw 282 soldiers standing in perfect formation, their eyes following her, their silence louder than any cheer. That image would stay with her forever. Voiceover. Years later, when she was long retired, Leah Morgan rarely spoke of that day. But her story became legend, passed quietly from one generation of soldiers to another. It wasn't about violence. It was about courage. The courage to say, no. The courage to demand respect when no one else would give it. The courage to remind the world that strength has no gender. Scene. Interview style. Present day. An old veteran speaks to the camera, eyes soft, voice raspy. She didn't just break his arm. She broke a rule that needed breaking. Another soldier. She showed us that leadership isn't about rank. It's about backbone. Voiceover. Emotional build. History forgets names like Leah's, because the world doesn't like stories that make it uncomfortable. But for the men and women who served beside her, she was more than a soldier. She was a symbol, because sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought on foreign soil. They're fought inside the walls of your own home, your own base, your own heart. And when a single person stands up against injustice, they don't just protect themselves. They protect everyone who will come after them. That's what Leah Morgan did. Slow music, piano and strings. Years later, she was invited to speak at a military academy. She walked on stage, gray hair tucked under her cap, uniform crisp, medals shining softly. She looked out at hundreds of young faces, men and women, staring back at her with admiration. And she said, "I'm not proud that I hurt someone that day, but I am proud that I didn't let someone hurt me." She paused, looking around the room. "Courage," she said, "isn't about fighting the enemy. It's about fighting fear, even when it wears a friendly face." The audience stood and clapped. And among them were officers who'd once whispered her name like a rumor. Now standing in respect. Dash dash dash. Voiceover. Reflective. Time has a way of healing wounds, and revealing truth. Colonel Davis retired quietly a few years later. He never apologized, but he never spoke against her again. Some say he even kept her photo in his office, as a reminder. Montage. Archival footage style. Shots of dusty boots. The crack of dawn over the desert. Hands lifting the American flag. A woman's silhouette standing alone against the sunrise. Voiceover. Leah Morgan never became famous. No book deal. No movie. But for 282 soldiers who witnessed that moment, she was a hero. And if you ask them what they remember most, they won't talk about the fight. They'll talk about the silence afterward. When they all realized something had changed forever. Because for the first time, they didn't just see a woman in uniform. They saw a soldier, equal, fierce, unyielding. Voiceover. Final, heartfelt. So tonight, wherever you are, remember her. Remember every person who ever stood up when it was dangerous to stand. Every soul who refused to be broken. The battlefield has many faces. Some covered in dust, some in tears, some in quiet defiance. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one broken arm, one act of courage, to remind the world that honor still exists. Closing scene. Slow pan over flag, music swells. Movie camera voiceover with emotion. Thank you for watching this story, here on USA Battle Zone. If this story moved you, if it made you feel proud, angry, or inspired, then don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because out here, we don't just tell stories of war. We tell stories of human spirit. This is USA Battle Zone, where every story is a battle for the soul.